Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 250 of Weighing In. He's Grant Turner. I'm David Mirikitani. We're brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Grant, you know me. I'm a pretty corny guy when it gets right down to it. 250 is a big number for us. I want to take a minute and thank Andy Hamilton. I want to thank Justin Tritz over when he was at Track Wrestling for first giving me a shot on the air. Andy Hamilton was a co-host. Alex Dean was a co-host. Marcus Hain was a co-host. Mark Ostrander was a guy that really drove the Weighing In podcast with the rankings, because it was primarily a rankings podcast, and he was the silent partner in the rankings. Mark is one of the most selfless people I know, didn't want credit for anything. I had to talk him into coming on the air with us. I'm a little sad he can't be here today. Wasn't really keeping count, but when I saw 249, I figured I better mention it. Also want to thank like the Cody Goodwins and the Jason Kecks of the world that have come in and pinch hit or added a lot of value to the podcast. But and I tell people this is like my favorite hour of the week, talking to you and Mark on the air. It's we talk a lot, but it's fun. It's like for me, it's like my younger and older brother. You know, it's a lot of fun, and I just want to thank everybody for 250, and I especially with you being here, I want to thank you for making Mark and I raise our games and be better at what we do.
So glad to be a part of the Weighing In podcast and the Weighing In community, especially with you and with Marco. Once again, also big thanks to USA Wrestling for giving us the opportunity to be talking wrestling on their platform. So it's a very cool honor to have that be in our back pocket, and having the likes of Gary Abbott support us in what we're doing to support wrestling in the U.S. and abroad.
Yeah, big shout to Gary and to Rich Bender for taking a chance on us when we moved over. And thanks to Mike and Joe and Ellen for the people that get us on the air every week. So we'll be done being corny. We'll get into wrestling. We'll start with U17s, GT. USA Wrestling down at the Pan Am's, a bunch of double golds, pretty much doing what USA Wrestling does at that age group level. By the way, the new jackets for them, nice. The sweats with the white piping. We've used those before. I was actually thinking about using those for what we're going to do for Border Brawl. So the kids look nice and clean. Couple of double winners down there. And quick shout out to my guy, Zan Fugit, who's wrestled in Border Brawl, Missouri kid. Nixa High School, Dustin Martin, Springfield Mo. Shout out to those guys, Scott. And he's going to go to OU, so Lou Rosselli got himself a good one. You watch all these tournaments, at least the highlights, you know who's what. Is this a team that we should expect to see some on the men and women's side? A lot of these athletes progressing up and making under 20, under 23s and senior level teams.
I think this is, once again, I think this is where people start to get that exposure to the international world, even at the U15 level. And then all of these people will then, I think this is more of kind of the preview to the Fargo and then to the collegiate game. There's a long gap between there to your senior level, but I think this kind of sets the stage for the collegiate game, and then also then for the U23 world teams as they go on and be participants in college.
There's so many events, like we run Border Brawl in September. We moved it from October because we had some people that said no because of the proximity to Super 32s. And it's awesome that there's no dead weekends now, basically. I think maybe the weekend after Fargo, maybe 2 weekends after Fargo are like the only dead weekends in wrestling on the high school level. And then there's probably an international event or something else, or you start working on rankings and those kind of things. But it is, I didn't think of it the way you said it, but you're right. Like a ton of these kids, like we were working on an event with Valiant Prep, and I know a couple of their kids won. And their big meet is Fargo, because right now they're working on getting their accreditation or affiliation lined up with the Arizona State Tournament and national preps, whatever way they're going to go. So I always tell people, you and I recruited for a lot of years. You're still recruiting. The most money you can ever make in your life as a high school athlete before NIL as a wrestler was winning Fargo your junior year in high school in freestyle. And the coaches know it and the kids know it. And there's a lot of peaking going on. So I think that tournament, which we're recording this on June 30, starts in about 2.5 weeks. It's fireworks, right?
Yeah, I mean, once again, taking that leap as, like maybe a second year cadet, and then going into maybe your first year junior as you go into like Fargo, and like having a good tournament or getting a good run puts you on the radar for a lot of people for your collegiate, I say prowess. And then if you don't have a great junior year, doesn't necessarily mean that you're not on everybody's radar, but once again, it's a huge help to you if that's where you're wanting to be in college wrestling. And if you want to be at the very, very top of the collegiate wrestling worlds, it's always like, oh, Fargo All-American, Fargo champ, or, he was really good, maybe about round of 12, maybe he went 5-2, but didn't place, but he lost to.
Those are the guys we recruit, right? The guys that lost to the first and third place guys that lost in the round of 12 or 16, right?
Well, then it opens up the avenue for the recruiting aspect of like, well, he's really good at wrestling, but how are his grades? How are his family? How is his situation? Does he really like wrestling, or is he just really good at wrestling? So then it just gives you that aspect of you get to showcase your talents, and then you get to talk to people and really build your brand a little bit when you go to, the Fargo Nationals.
Yeah. The question you said, does he love wrestling or is he good at wrestling, is the $64,000 question when it comes to recruiting, right? Because, if person A is really good at it, but when it gets hard for them, they're going to quit. And person B, it's already been hard for them and they refuse to quit. Even if person B is 6-8 points behind person A right now, we'd all probably recruit person B. We've been through it enough to know. So, especially in a room like yours where they're going to take their lumps. Like, it's just, that's part of the process. And yeah, so it's interesting to watch and see how kids develop, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what room you're in. If you're a freshman walking in and there's a fifth year gritty senior that's been a part of the program for a long time, like, or even a really talented junior, it's like, hey man, it's college wrestling. So, I mean, you're not beating up on
a little guy.
You're not beating up on athletes that don't have a driver's license. Like, it's like, hey, you can be a really good high school kid and have a freshman every other duel.
Your teammates not having a driver's license to a teammate that can legally buy a beer. Like, it's like very quick.
There's just a difference, right? So it's a difference between the high school level and then also then a collegiate level, even for the guys that are extremely talented. There's levels to the game as you continue on. Now, some of those guys are becoming college ready really quickly. The U17 kids that are doubling up and going off and making world teams.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about Felicity Taylor going to Iowa. So you're obviously there. You're working with Clarissa Chun because, Iowa's a Nike school, and I know you already had an existing relationship with her with USA Wrestling. How important is Felicity to what Clarissa and Gary Mayab? It was very interesting, by the way, when you read the article. Gary Mayab was a reason, not probably the reason, but a reason that she went. And, there's some people, we talked about it, both sides of the coin. You took the pro Gary Mayab side, and not that I'm anti Gary Mayab. I've known him forever and respect him, but just to play devil's advocate, but immediately paying some sort of dividends in the recruiting process.
Yeah, I think, once again, very, very clearly stated that, yeah, I took the pro side of that argument. You're definitely on the pro Gary Mayab person side. So as we discussed that,
right.
Once again, it was just for for the
Devil's
lights.
advocate.
Yeah, that's for the lights and the cameras. That's for everybody to see, right?
Yeah.
So, but with their program in general, I think it's with all collegiate programs, having the different strokes, meaning you have Gary Mayab, you have Clarissa Chun. I was actually over there a little bit ago. They have been approved for a third coach and also a director of ops role for the program.
Oh, nice.
So it's going to be done the right way. So I don't know when any of those announcements could happen, or if they have a field, or if they're, whatever may be occurring. But I do think that it being approved gives them a little bit of a heads up on, this is legit Division I coaching staff. They're making sure that the program is off to the right start. Because in a Power 5 school like that, you have to look and feel professional. It's not going to be done in the breadth of, we're just not going to put the money that is required to get this program to the place where it needs to be.
Yeah, we're not going to bare minimum this, right? Yeah.
So for Felicity to go there, I mean, it's a bona fide stud within the women's ranks. Also with her being a former, Iowa high school athlete coming back, women's wrestling being sanctioned, basically coming back to her home state. Anytime that could happen, even if, let's say, for instance, some school in California starts a Division I Power 5, so let's say UCLA or USC starts a program, and all of a sudden you have the likes of, a Diamond Guilford or, forgive me, there's like Gracie Figueroa, studs that have been through the high school ranks come back home to end their collegiate career back in their home state. It does a lot for the morale and the building of those high school programs. If you can see somebody from where you're from come back home and help get something rolling.
You said, I agree with everything you said, but you said something else that I don't know if you actually, if this was your intent, but it's a very interesting concept. Do you think there's any chance that a school will start a women's program first? Like at the Division I level, because we've seen it, obviously, and maybe we're looking at, maybe we need to flip this thing on its head. But I think a lot of people, including myself, have thought, okay, well, women should wrestle because the benefits of wrestling, the physical, mental, spiritual, friendships, all the stuff shouldn't just apply to one gender, right? Second thing is women's wrestling is really, really good. It's not good for girls or women, which I think is a very outdated viewpoint. And obviously the value and the quality of coaches that have poured themselves into women's wrestling is a direct correlation in getting better athletes and them having better people to train with and et cetera. But maybe I need to open my mind to this. I've always thought, okay, well, hey, Iowa had wrestling and now they're going to add women's wrestling. Oklahoma State, any school. I live in Missouri. Well, Missouri had women's wrestling. But is there a chance that a school will add, a Division I school will add women's wrestling first and actually drag a men's team along?
It's very fair to think, because I believe in, and once again, I don't have the collective data to maybe prove what I'm going to say, is the women's participation in states, let's say Washington, Texas, California, are legitimately powerhouse states that have produced a lot of wrestlers. Not to say they're winning Fargo or whatever, but California has a lot more populace, meaning
they won junior duels.
Yeah. So, but once again, by participation alone at the high school ranks, they have some very, very big numbers to look at, and they've probably been around for a lot longer than maybe some of the other states that are just now getting sanctioned.
Right.
But for instance, in Texas, there's a lot of Power 5 schools in the state. And there could be an opportunity for a lot of those people to stay at home and wrestle there. Or, for instance, in California or Washington or Oregon, anything that would be in that Power 5 network meaning Pac-12, Big 12, SEC. But one of the criteria that a lot of these Power 5 schools are looking at is like, where's our competition going to be? Like
Yeah.
So financially, like, okay, let's say, for instance, USC starts a program, and I'm just using USC because it's in Southern California or whatever. We could say Stanford or
it doesn't,
anything like that.
But USC is interesting because they don't have a men's program. The analogy is more interesting. So go ahead.
So then basically you look at that and you say, well, okay, well, do we have to go to Iowa every time we want to get a Division I opponent?
Right.
So, or is it going to be like, hey, we're invested into this, but I don't know. It could be a conference deal, very similar like how the Big Ten starts getting things rolling. And it very well could be a Big Ten start. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, we don't want to get left behind. All of a sudden the ACC starts, or, whatever it may be, Big 12, Western region, and kind of get those combined schools together. But it's very possible that a Division I program could start just with women's that doesn't have a men's program and then bring along a men's program. But I think while you have all of these factors occurring, having it at a men's program, you already have kind of a loyal fan base. You have some infrastructure. You already have a room. I think there's advantages to having an established men's program that would then help maybe drive some attention and recruiting to there. Or you're just going to have to put on your hard hat and build and get people to, be investors and, room, donor, athletics, assistant coach, like the whole thing that's going to happen, wherever that's going to be, that's a job for somebody that wants to build something from the ground up.
Yeah. And as usual, money drives everything, right? So like, you got to have a lot of money to get started. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why when Iowa came out and said they're going to have a women's wrestling team, any of us that follow wrestling, even at a cursory level, goes, well, they're not going to do like what, and I don't mean this critically, but like what Fresno did, like create just enough money for 5 years of a program and then tell the coach, not only do you have to coach, not only do you have to recruit, not only do you have to win, but you have to fundraise enough, which is just like they needed to hire a full-time fundraising person or endow it. There's two things that I wrote down as you were talking. Number one is, as I was thinking of the wrestlers, I was thinking of Eliana Bomarito, who you and I met at Michigan Border Brawl. Four-time state champion Michigan, really, really good wrestler. I think she wrestles like 225 or whatever the weight class is at the junior girls division. I don't know if I get it wrong by a few pounds, I apologize. But she's going to junior college because there's no weight class like near that size at the 4-year schools, at the NAIs, at the D1s, anything like that. Because she is a huge recruit. I want to say that properly. But she's only a recruit at schools that can actually provide her a weight class to wrestle. And so I'm hoping that changes in terms of inclusiveness. I mean, she's just a girl with a big frame that she looks a lot better than most of the heavyweights, the boys heavyweights in terms of body fat percentages and things like that. The second thing, which you mentioned, and I talked to a guy about this, I don't think we have time to deep dive it, but he said, if you want to grow wrestling, like he goes, you need to get the Big 12 to commit to wrestling. He's like, Kansas State. He's like, the Big 12 is actually only 10 schools now, but that's the name of the conference. But like Texas Tech, Texas A&M used to be in there. I guess Texas is leaving now too to go to the SEC. But like these schools, really like the Kansas schools are the ones that come to mind immediately. Back when he said this, like Colorado was in the Big 12 and everything's moving around now. But that if you can get a commitment at a conference level, like, hey, you have to have this team. And obviously somebody would probably say that for the right amount of money. So it's probably a conversation for people above our pay grade, but it's one of the ways to make things grow. So it's an interesting topic. So you and I talked off the air. One of the tweets we both saw was Yanni Diakomahalis saying he's going to He's got 7-4 and the dealer's holding 5, so he's going to double down and go U23s. And if you don't play blackjack, you don't get that analogy, but that's okay. So always split aces and 8s. So, but he's going to go U23s and go seniors. So to back up, because you explained this to the audience last week, if you made Final X and are eligible for U23s, win or lose, you got the spot. I saw some people on Twitter arguing about this, and I land on the side, if you're good enough to be in the top 2 in our country, you're probably the best 23-year-old in our country, because that person could have tried to be in the tournament you were in and didn't make it that far. So I think USA Wrestling, and we're on the air, but I think I've disagreed with USA Wrestling from time to time. I think they absolutely got this one right. But when I mentioned Yanni, you mentioned some other folks. So let's point out all the people that are doing the double up.
So I think the biggest thing when USA Wrestling made this determination is that, let's say, for instance, Yanni ended up losing the spot, or then he's got to go compete again in a special wrestle-off against whoever was in Ohio at the tournament. Then it becomes a whole other thing for him then to travel to go do another thing. So, I mean, there's multiple reasons why they've kind of gone this way. But yeah, I think, for instance, if Yanni would have went to Ohio, I think he would have done fairly well. So I know that I believe it's on the women's side, we have some people that have been able to double up, meaning go for both, basically both spots. So like Emma Bruntel, she didn't win, but she's going to be the U23 representative from Final X. I believe Emmett Allure has the ability to confirm her spot as both, senior world and then U23. Diamond Guilford is both the senior and U23 representative. I don't know if Abby Nettie is still in that realm. If not, then she would have first right of refusal to take that spot. So I think on the Greco-Roman side, once again, I think Colton Schultz has the ability to do both.
Yeah.
Britton Holmes, who wrestled Kamal Bay, he takes the spot at 77 kilos for U23s. On the men's freestyle side, I think all of them, besides Yanni, have aged out of that particular team.
I think Arujau can go U23s, but since he lost to Gilman, he can't double, right?
Correct. So he can't be both the representative for both teams. So as far as doubling up, I think we've covered a majority of them.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably nobody else that will be able to be both representing the senior and the U23 teams in both tournaments, which has then been basically September and then October.
Yeah, it's an awesome opportunity to ever represent your country, ever wear the USA Wrestling logo, to ever get every week on Twitter, and I don't follow a ton of people, but I see the Nike packages that arrive for these athletes and how excited they are. The singlets, the sweatsuits, the walking around shoes, all those kind of things. And I think there's a little bit more juice to that when you go, where'd you get those shoes? And like, well, I'm on Team USA, whether it's U15s or whether it's, the Masters division. It's still, that stuff is meaningful to people as it should be. So pretty awesome. All right. We talked a little bit about this. I want to touch on it a little bit more. The bylaw changes in the NCAA. True freshmen can wrestle 5 dates, still redshirt, no unattached competition for true freshmen. Minimum scholarship is 0.2 and a 2.0 GPA. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the last two. I really just want to focus on, and Flo put an article out about it, and it was interesting. And I think there's a lot of validity to what they had to say. I look at it, I'll tell you where I look at it from the junior college guy point of view. It's like, awesome. Now I don't have to have let's say Grant Turner was a superstar recruit that was 1 core credit short because he had a bad high school counselor, and we're going to redshirt him. Everybody wanted him in the country. Now he doesn't have to drive his own car. Now he could be on the bus, and I can pay for his hotel and pay for his housing and pay for his entry fee and all this other stuff. And it's just safer. He doesn't have to drive back, or have his dad do it or something like that. But I think the Division I and probably 2, 3 NAIA, you're not going to see, okay, well, now we can just enter them in more open tournaments. It sounds like, well, why would we burn those dates? Those dates don't matter. And that's a functional part of wrestling where the only 2 tournaments that matter in the whole season are the conference tournament and the national championship. And the conference tournament only matters to get you into the national championship. But like you can enter, if you're that same guy and I'm a Division I coach and I'm not sure, like, man, you're really pushing our 5th-year senior, but he's ranked number 3 in the country and he can't redshirt. But now I can wrestle you in Vegas. Now I can wrestle you in Scuffle. Now I can wrestle you in Midlands. Now I can wrestle you in a big duel against the number 2 guy in the country if my senior's got a chicken bite or studying for finals or whatever, like that kind of stuff. Is that how you kind of see it playing out? And you're on a coaching staff, do you feel like that might be how coaches look at it?
Yeah, I think it'll be determined by each staff's way of thinking when it comes to these dates, right? So very well could be like, hey, we're going to go to Cliff Keen, Scuffle, and we're going to go to maybe one other big open, and those are going to 3 out of your 5 dates or whatever it may be, and right. Be like, these are your opportunities to basically represent and go and do whatever. It's just going to be determined about that. Because some of the guys do a lot more maybe Saturday tournaments. Some may do a lot more dual meet heavy schedules. So maybe we're going to utilize you in a duel against a team that is within our conference, but we want to make sure that we get you a match, whether it be, at home or away, doesn't matter. So I think it's going to be determined by the staffs on how they basically do that for themselves and how they can best utilize the talent that they do have. If they have a whole bunch of studs and you want to see them how they go and put them in big tournaments, here we go.
Yeah, it allows you to see what you really have. I think maybe the hidden benefit, and I'm not saying we're the only ones that are about to talk about it, but I haven't seen a public conversation on it. And you're a coach and you wrestled. And it happened to me. I felt like I got lost in my redshirt year. Like, it's really weird to go to practice every day, especially as a freshman, and you went from being the king of the room to not being the king of the room, like we talked about earlier. And especially after like really Thanksgiving, there's almost no open tournaments. I mean, this was 100 years ago, but I don't think that, if anything, it's gotten worse. There used to be more open tournaments second semester than there are now. So now you're just going in and you're basically just a training. I'm just there to help you get better. Like, you're the starter and, hey, Grant needs to do 80% of the goes and you need to give him a good look and you need to give him a good feel and be a left leg lead guy and give him a left collar or be good at riding legs, and a part of wrestling is your own selfish growth, right? Like, if you don't feel like you're trying to grow, then it's easy to get, to lose your path, to lose your vision. And so I think the idea, just the concept of, hey, you could still, you wrestled at Iowa State, like, you could still wrestle Iowa, you could still wrestle Oklahoma State, you could still wrestle whoever the case may be. I wrestled at Iowa State, so same thing. We just wrestled in polyester and you're wrestling in the good stuff, but so no shots. It's 250. Hey. You gotta be nice today. So, yep. I get a freebie today. But I think just that idea, keeps kids more engaged and involved and probably helps a lot of these kids have a better freshman year, don't you think?
Yeah, as long as once again, I think people get lost when they go from high school to college in general. Like, you're out on your own, you're doing your classes by yourself. It's an unrealistic world where you're like, well, hey, what am I doing? I'm practicing twice a day. I'm going to school throughout of it. Like, I have freedom that I've never felt before. And, you just have all of this to basically combat all at once. So athletically, like, maybe it keeps them more engaged on all fronts, because once again, this is something that you're doing a lot of as a Division I or Division II or Division III or NAI JUCO athlete. A lot of these guys, they're spending more time doing wrestling learning than studying each course, right? So you're not going to spend as much time maybe on math, 10 to 20 hours a week. You might be spending that amount of time on that subject, maybe half that.
No, wrestling's your number one course in terms of time consumption, for sure.
So then if you're lost in that process, you think you're going to be able to snap out of it and get better at some of the other things? I mean, once again, if you're doing that amount of time doing that, you want them to be engaged. You want them to be, yeah. So I think maybe this will help some of those athletes be a little bit more tuned in as they make that transition from high school to college.
Yeah, chemistry lab is a lot harder when you're getting your teeth kicked in and there's no light at the end of the tunnel, right? I mean, I think that's it. So I think that's one of the, I don't want to say it was an unintended consequence, because that would be unfair to say that something that's a good result that the people that were in charge of this didn't mean to do, because that's just, I mean, let's say it's an intended consequence, okay? That like, hey, because people didn't see it, but this is a nice result that these guys and girls, but I mean, really, I think in women's wrestling, most of these young ladies that are good are probably going to go right away, as opposed to men where there's just depth and as the field builds up, it'll probably be more both ways, but that these freshmen will have a better chance of just having a better freshman year, overall, just a better quality of life. So that's pretty awesome. We got about 10 minutes left, so I think we can dip into this. Intermat put out their preseason rankings. Let me preface this by saying the people that just started watching this podcast, this started out as a rankings podcast. We started at Track Wrestling. We were the first ones to rank 25 because 25 guys score points. We were the first to rank 33 because 33 guys enter the tournament. There were some selfish reasons for doing that. More colleges used our rankings because our guys were in there more. And we were held to a pretty strict Sunday night deadline because a lot of these SIDs wanted to put stuff out on Monday morning. The hardest ranking is probably the preseason one, because it's the easiest to miss somebody. It's easiest to forget about somebody. Coaches are more than a little sketchy about who's going what weight because they don't have any reason to tell you the truth. If somebody's in trouble, if somebody's academically ineligible, they're not going to tell you that. So you rank guys that, technically aren't going to score points. And in the case of Minnesota, you have a guy who's probably the biggest favorite in the tournament, and he has eligibility. And as of now, we don't know if he's coming back or not. So let me see if I can do a share screen here. All right. Okay. So, and I talked to Earl Smith, GT, and I think he's going to try to come on next week, because how they did these rankings, I'm not saying they're right or wrong. They're a little different than how Mark and I would have done them. Our process would be you take everybody who All-American and coming back and put them in an order. Then you take the round of 12 guys. And the way we did it was whoever was the highest seeded would just fall in an order, then round of 16, then round of 24, then round of 32. Start with that. Then plug in red shirts, not necessarily at the bottom, but plug them in accordingly. And then the tricky part is people that are moving in and out, and then freshmen that are coming into the lineup. But, so they did some things differently. And then I love Earl. I know you love Earl too. So it's not going to be an argumentative conversation. It's more interesting of just how'd you guys get to these spots? So we'll just kind of fly through these. We don't have real long, but if you look at the top 8 here, Lee, Gloria, Rujao, DeAugustino, McKee, Cordy, Barnett, Kaler, and then you got a guy like Noah Certain. Like, that's what stuck out to me here is he was a round of 12 guy, and he's ranked 15th. If we had done the rankings, he would have been significantly higher. So this is a pretty good weight, though. There's a lot of guys coming back that have been on the podium, right?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, like you have Spencer Lee back in the rankings, so I could understand why maybe Noah fell a little bit further. But yeah, there's a lot of proven talent in that top 19 that you can just see right there.
The top 9 have all been on the podium, I'm almost positive. So That's pretty strong. 33, RBY, Fix, McGee, Bird. So this is where we would have differed, but it was Ragusin, Cannon, Philippi, Foley, Kolioko. So, and then you see like a Sam Latona, who, thank God for him, gets to move up a weight class and eat more than one meal a day. Cannon, I believe, placed, and Ragusin didn't. So by our criteria, we would have had him above him, and Philippi placed in previous years and actually beat Dayton Fix. So we would have had him next. I'd have to look at, I think Ragusin would have been ahead of Foley because he did better in the tournament at the same weight class. But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 medalists here at one point or another. And RBY is low key working on becoming one of the all-time greats. Has the ability to be a 3-time champ and beat a guy who is one of our best freestyle wrestlers, possibly 3 years in a row.
Yeah, I mean, RBY is very, very quietly and also very loudly becoming an all-time great with the collegiate wrestling community.
For sure. And his style is very unique. And like, I work with some jiu-jitsu guys, and they don't call it go behinds, they call it RBY. So that's pretty awesome. I just stopped correcting them. So as long as they're doing it right, it's fine, right? So this is a weight that feels like there's a lot of upheaval. Like, a lot of the guys graduated, and even a lot of the guys that didn't place this year who were really good graduated, like Ironman, CJ Red, those kind of guys. But Cole Matthews won, Real Woods. And when we look at the team race, the impact of Real Woods jumping in second place is worth 16 points in this metric. Berglund, Composto, Alirez, Carlson, Hart, D'Amelio. This to me feels like the most of the first 3 weights, for sure, the one with the chance for the most topsy-turvy. Is that how you see it the same way? Yeah,
I mean, once again, when you lose guys like that have been mainstays in this weight class for so long, it's kind of that next man up mentality, and all these guys are going to raise their level. So you'll see a lot of, like these sophomore athletes, Composto, Emilio, Carter Young, Zargo, like all of these guys coming up through. It's like, well, maybe they make a huge jump.
Right.
So we'll see.
Mizzou has a good problem here. They redshirted Brock Muller last year and wrestled Edmond at 49, but he's really a 41. And Edmond the year before lost to Hart in overtime in the wrestle-off, and Missouri has very much used wrestle-offs as the way of deciding their lineup over the years. So Edmond could be a guy that would break in here because Muller's back at 49, which we'll see in a minute, but nice to have that kind of depth. And a lot of the matches that Edmond lost, he lost to guys that looked like they were bigger and certainly taller than him. So 41 would probably be a better fit. 49. So we got Yanni, Gomez, Sasso, Lovett. So where we struggled here, Mark and I, we talked about is Ridge Lovett took second in nationals. There's no way in our mind doesn't start out second in the preseason. So that's one of the things we wanted to talk to Earl about, which we will. Mahler's returning All-American. Milner's returning All-American. Parko's returning All-American. Murin's placed before. Yaya's placed before. Jaden Abbas has placed before. So you have, and Dom Demas has placed before. So,
and Sherman.
I'm sorry?
And Zach Sherman.
Oh, he did? Okay, geez.
I thought he was like he got 7th or 8th. I think it was like maybe a year or 2 ago.
Okay. So you've got the top 10 here, plus Demas, plus Sherman, 12 All-Americans. Then you have new blood like Victor V. And, you've got like age group guys like Verclaren. I mean, this weight's really, really good. Yet I think everyone would be shocked if Yanni didn't win.
Right.
Yeah, crazy weight. So probably we'll see a lot of movement, though. I think like 2 through, really like 2 through 12. I think, I'd be shocked if it ends up in this order at the end of the year. Somebody I think Flo did a preview of Nebraska's lineup, and I think Ridge Lovett is here because they need a 49 pounder, but I'm pretty sure he could make 41. And I can tell you this, if Rich Levitt went to 41 and we were doing rankings, he would be ranked number 1 in the preseason. So, I think Nebraska will have a decision to make. I might be better for them in duels to have Levitt at 49, but at the national tournament, if you think he can win it at 41, that's probably the better decision. So if we go to 57, so this was another interesting one. Brayton Lee, who was hurt, is 1. Peyton Robb placed ahead of Will Lewan, so I don't know how he's not 2. But it's Lewan 2, Robb 3, Teamer 4. Bryce Andonian moves up. Ed Scott is ranked ahead of Austin O'Connor, even though Austin O'Connor placed the Nationals and Ed Scott didn't. Your boy Franek, Humphreys, Zaff down the line. Wyatt Sheets is coming back for another year. I didn't know Jake Hughes had another year, but I get it's so hard to keep track of everything with all these COVID years. But another really solid weight, but a weight noticeably where Quincy Monday and David Carr are not ranked at this weight.
And Deacon's gone.
And so
for his 9th year of school.
Yes.
I feel like he's been around since, I don't know, the early 2000s.
That's a guy too. Like he's like Ben Keeter. If you're built like that guy, you should never wear a shirt ever. Like shirt's optional at all times. So do you feel like this is a weight where there could be a lot of change at the very, very top in terms of rankings all year?
Yeah, I think so. I think with a lot of those guys kind of, beating up on each other, that gives people like that are from the outside looking in opportunity. Like an Austin O'Connor, Franek, Ed Scott, basically trying to like make their way from, that lower tier of like the bottom 4 All-Americans into like, a 2, 3, 4 seeding criteria.
Yeah. The ACC is low key good here too, by the way. Like they have 5 guys in the top 12. So that's a tournament that doesn't have a lot of depth because of numbers, just sheer numbers of conferences in the conference, but 5 in the top 12 is better than anybody else here. So that's really awesome for them. 165 is a weight that's absolutely fascinating. O'Toole's back. Griffith is back. Carr rotates in. Quincy Monday rotates in or moves up, I guess a better way to say it. Amin, Hamady, Karchla, Peyton Hall, Julian Ramirez, McCoy, Ogunsanya. I mean, now, Mark had a great point. He said, it feels like the first 7 are like you'd be shocked if they didn't All-American. And then it feels like it's just a cat fight for that 8th spot. But this weight's just juice to the gills, right, GT?
Yeah, I mean, also you have Alex Marinelli's replacement in the lineup with Patrick Kennedy, who won U23s.
He's at 17. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, and then also Whitlake, prior All-American, is back from injury.
I heard Whitlake weighs 195 pounds and is just yoked. So he got on, I think he went on the Derek White plan. I think he may be up at 84.
You never know. I mean, but as you look down here at the bottom, right, you got a lot of guys that have tons of, like, Facundo. How good can he be? Once again, he's a Penn State freshman, or who knows how fast that kid can maybe rise to the top. Lamer, another good one.
Sparks
was in the lineup all last year. So, like, when you get into these things, as you look at a weight class, it's like, I think this one has the potential to be very top heavy, but then you have a whole bunch of guys that have had really good success that could make their way up there and shake up things as the season progresses. Once again, preseason rankings are preseason rankings. It's just right. Right?
9 house, Oklahoma in the portal, so they get a top 20 guy. Big help for them, especially in dual meets. Another great weight here, Starachi, Lewis, Labs, Plott, Smith, Lout, Demetrius Romero, who I think is 25 years old, Mikey O'Malley, Canigliaro, Peyton Mako, Cade DeVos. Big 12 is pretty well represented here, 4 in the top 11. Foca, who I was high on early in the year. Nelson Brands is back off injury. Edmund Ruth, training with his brother. Rocky Jordan transfers to Chat. So obviously was behind Ethan Smith and wasn't going to find his way in the lineup. Just another really good weight. I'm here for Starachi Lewis as many times as we can watch those two guys wrestle, right? Right, GT?
What was that?
I said I'd watch Starachi and Lewis wrestle all day.
Oh, yeah. I think that's part of the magic of that weight class, because both of those guys are extremely talented. Hopefully everything matches up for those guys to wrestle again. I mean, that's just those guys just know how to wrestle. They're just flat out good at the sport. I love watching those guys compete.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sequences where there was no scoring was amazing. A pretty heavy favorite here. Brooks 1, Keckheisen 2, Heidley 3, Romero 4, Coleman 5, Munoz 6, Jonathan Lowe 7. So again, Lowe placed and Munoz didn't. So that had been different in our rankings. Poznansky 8, Bronigal, Moore, Kane, Hunter Bolin hanging around at 12, and Assad at 13. And then Montalvo transfers to ASU and is at 18. So I feel like Montalvo must have known something was going on, because otherwise, I mean, there's nobody from Oklahoma State ranked above him. He would have been the guy.
Yeah, Tate Samuelson going to Lehigh, transferring from Wyoming.
Yeah, Lehigh's had a couple good transfers, right? Because they got Beard too.
Yep.
Yeah, they're going to be low-key real good, especially in dual meets. Okay, 97. Dean 1, Ferrari 2, Warner 3, Buchanan 4, Elam 5. Truax moves up, so he's 6. Bastida 7, Dupre 8, Beard 9, Hoffman 10, Bonacorsi 11. I know we struggled when we looked at this because Hoffman placed last year, and not everybody above him placed. I mean, obviously Ferrari pops in, but for example, Beard didn't wrestle last year. Dupre didn't place. I think even though Hoffman was a really low seed, you have to give him credit. But then you go down the line, GT, and these are the guys we see in the summer. Tanner Sloan, Ethan Laird, Cam Caffey, Isaac Trumbull, Braxton Amos, those, just those 4 or 5 names plus Cardenas. I think Foy just made a Greco world team. There's a ton of talent at this weight class.
Yeah, I think this is, and then, Owen Pence, he was one that I believe pinned, can't remember who he did.
Nebraska.
Yeah, Schultz.
Yeah.
Multiple, 2-year starter, 3-year starter for whatever it is, North Dakota State. Yeah, I think there's tons of potential and talent here in the bottom half of the rankings. Tanner Sloan making world teams, Trumbull, monster in freestyle, Braxton Amos, runner-up in Greco at 97 kilograms.
Yeah, it's a weird bracket because those guys are so good, and you got Nino Bonacorsi, who a couple years ago was in the national finals, ranked 11th. So I feel like there'll be a lot of topsy-turvy stuff here as well. So, so this one is the one that I think impacts the team rankings a ton. So let's start with who's ranked and who isn't. Schultz, Kirkfleet, Paris, Cassiope, Slavikowski, Davison, Orndorff, Hendrickson, Fernandez, Elam, Luffman, Hilger. Lucas Davison placed and Slavikowski didn't, so we would have flip-flopped that. But the king is waiting in the wings, and when we get to the team rankings, which we can talk about in a second, this is a gigantic team ranking domino, because not only would Minnesota immediately get 20 points in the rankings, but like Arizona State would lose 4, and Penn State would lose 2.5, and Michigan would lose a point or 2, and Iowa would lose a point or 2, and on down the line. So, but this one we talked about, this weight class is so stupid good in terms of like world, like Zach Elam was a age group silver medalist in the world, and he's 10. So, I mean, you have a very good mind for this historically. This weight class was last year and this year just kind of crazy good, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of accolades to these past 2 years of heavyweight wrestling, and especially if you throw Gable Steepson back into this
Yeah.
Potential bracket again. You got a lot of firepower here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so here's the point, and Penn State 99, Iowa 73, Arizona State 63.5. This is based on 20 points for first, down to 5.5 for eighth, with no bonus points. It includes advancement points, but no bonus points. But if you sort of see the log jam, really between 3 and 10, 63 down to 43, that's one guy seated high that doesn't wrestle well and one guy coming out of the woodwork that wasn't seated wrestling well. There's going to be a huge dogfight for, the third, fourth spots. The other thing is if you take Real Woods off of Iowa, they drop down to 57. And then if you added him back to Stanford, they would be at 34. So it's the transfer portal is gigantic in how all this works. Plus I think our team rankings would be different because we'd have a lot of those guys tweaked. Minnesota, if you just add Gable, they go to 68.5. They jump to third and nipping at the heels of Iowa. And I think that's fascinating to me. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think that Minnesota's got guys that have been in the lineups prior. And I think that Iowa, particularly just on their side, is they have a lot of guys that are coming back to, like Nelson Brands is getting back in the lineup. You have Patrick Kennedy, who's new. You have Abe Assad coming back to the lineup. You have Jacob Warner, who's been a stud, Cassiope. So it's a blend of kind of the new faces and kind of who's been around. And then you're going to have specifically at Minnesota, you got a couple of guys that are going to be ranked first. Brayton Lee's ranked first. Gable Stevenson's potentially would be ranked first. You have a lot of other guys that are in those, been on the scene for a while. McKee, Blockus, Foy.
They placed it pretty good last year.
Yep, Sparks. Guys that have been in the lineup for a while, right? So
they're low-key sneaky good. Nobody's talking about them, but especially a guy like McKee, who he could on a good day make the finals, but he's already proven he'll wrestle hard on the back and score bonus. Those are the guys as a coach you feel pretty comfortable about. So we'll probably get Earl on next week. He was driving, and USA Wrestling, we have a firm policy. We don't put people on the air while they're driving from a liability standpoint. I was told that the very first episode, and I hadn't thought of it, but I concur. Catch Me If You Can, Leonardo DiCaprio, I should have concurred. So I want to thank everybody that's ever watched or listened to any of the 250. It's a pleasure to talk to people, and got a ton of cool feedback at Junior Duels every time we go. People are very nice. They clearly state that GT and Mark are the stars of the show and I'm the anchor, but nonetheless, there still needed to be a third stooge, so I'll take it. So thanks everybody for watching, listening, and sharing. We'll see y'all next week.